All right, I thought I would talk a little bit about Jesus Christ. Now, my existential crisis guide and toolkit is my attempt to reformulate a structure of the world after a midlife crisis and psychotic break. It's not going to be perfect, and one of the areas that I've can be possibly wrong on is when I claim that it's when I say that I think Jesus was not resurrected and he's not divine himself. He's just appointed by the divine to be the top tier above every other single potential prophet there is. And this comes from a secular understanding of evolution initially and so on. So I've tried to marry evolution with theology a little bit in a high resolution manner using Jordan Peterson and Ian McGilchrist and Doug Wilson and John Piper and Mike Schmitz and Bishop Barron and Gavin Ortland and Athenite Audio and who else? Gregory Pine, maybe a little knowledge of Aquinas, and Peter Kreeft, and especially his Children of Socrates, philosophers of great philosophers or something, analysis, and also Preaching by Gene Scott, and his Introduction to Christianity and Faith, God's Heroes, categorize groups of preaching, collections or something. Now, what I'm going to say is very simple. If God were to only do one potential miracle in the universe, it would in fact be resurrecting Jesus Christ. If he had only one option, one time that he could break the laws of physics or override the laws of physics or whatever you want to call it for a genuine magical appearing miracle that cannot be debunked, it would be the resurrection. So my position, if you want pragmatic Christian beliefs, Doug Wilson is the premier guy to go to. If you want spiritedness, John Piper is the one to go to. If you want Christian history, Gavin Ortland is the one to go to. Bishop Barron is a little milquetoast, but but he's consistent about the spirit of your approach in daily life, typically speaking. Father Mike Schmitz is a really good anecdotal example of different things and punchy sort of storyteller and principles of that anecdote kind of guy, especially in his Sunday sermons, Sundays with Ascension. And you can find Father Mike Schmitz at Ascension Presents as well. Athonite audio is more monk focused. It's when you're really rearing to go for spiritual mysticism and so on. And so on. So my position is potentially radically different and potentially identical to the other Christians. I flip-flop between Jesus was resurrected, it's a miracle, it's the primary miracle, and Jesus was not resurrected, there are no magical miracles ever. It's a mystery. And what I want to say is this is probably one of those things where it's like, I'm in that zone of like, I think it was Paul saying that Jesus' resurrection was a stumbling block to the Jews and foolishness to the Gentiles. And what the thing about the Jews and the Gentiles in this case particularly meant the Greeks with their logic and logos, and the Jews with their system, their legalism, basically, is there can be an overemphasis on systematizing things, and this effort of mine, this playlist, is my attempt to systematize my life and so on. And Jesus is a mystery, whether he was resurrected or not, I don't know. And there's some evidence that he was, and then there's my reason telling me he wasn't, and so on. But there's a reason, I already mentioned the reason, which is if there was going to be one miracle ever, Jesus' resurrection would be the one. So, I know God exists. He seems to follow his own laws of physics just totally. But maybe I'm wrong about that. So I flip between Jesus was resurrected, Jesus was in a coma. I can't fully systematize them and be accurate. So if you're wondering what my position is, it's if you can believe in Jesus, and I simply cannot disprove his resurrection, and I'm not actually trying to like die hard. It just kind of came up as my out of the logic of my systematizing God's relationship with us a little bit. If you can believe in Jesus' resurrection, do so. And if you take my reasoned position that he wasn't resurrected, well, the fact is, when I call him the Messiah, I mean it. So while I might not necessarily believe in the writings of his resurrection, I believe in basically everything else, more or less. And the resurrection is basically, flip-flop one day and then the next day kind of thing. So it's kind of a weird thing. It's like a superposition or something like that. Like, I'm not sure what. I don't know. I can think one way and then I think the other way and then I think one way, then I think the other way, and it just goes back and forth. So I'm not trying to debunk, and I'm not saying I have debunked. I'm not claiming he's not the Messiah. It's just how he's the Messiah that I might differ one day to the next. However, there's a thing that I kind of am resting on here too, which is that there's a statement in the Bible that says, trust not in your own understanding, or lean not on your own understanding, but trust in the Lord and he will make your path straight. And basically, the mystery of the resurrection of Jesus is one of those things that, because I cannot disprove, but my reason tells me is probably not likely even with God existing, which I know is a fact, that God exists. Um, and I know that Christianity is his chosen religion. Um, there's there's some humility that needs to be practiced here. And basically what it is at some point you're going to encounter some depth or height of knowledge that you simply cannot grasp, at least temporarily. And you simply have to acknowledge your ignorance. Now, some people would contort this to say that that means you shouldn't think at all, but that's not what it means. What it means is don't force your worldview to be, I can understand everything all the time at once. Allow for a mystery to exist. And I don't mean forever necessarily, but I also don't mean you need to solve it necessarily either. There can be something you can't grasp at the moment, but you can grasp later. Think of like a heavy baseball bat or something. Like a toddler couldn't pick up the baseball bat, but an adult could. And then there's some things like a big 10-ton boulder that no one can really pick up, no matter how old they are. So the question is, which one is it? And the answer is time will tell. God will reveal it in due time, probably, if he means for you to understand it. And the failure to acknowledge the limits of your understanding, at least in the present moment, is what Jordan Peterson calls the Luciferian intellect. And by the way, this is what the socialists have, and why systematizing everything doesn't work, because of what's called Maxwell's demon. Now, Maxwell's demon is basically a concept of you have a closed space, nothing gets in, nothing gets out, and you have to measure everything in it and where it's going and so on. And the sheer entropy of the limited state and the chaos, like think chaos theory, overwhelms the limited actor within the closed system. But God is infinite, and he's always greater than any level of analysis you can do. So he always is one step ahead, no matter what, at least one step ahead. So when you trust in the Lord, you're essentially saying, God will enable me to eventually understand later, and so on. Understanding comes from knowledge and faith. And faith is sort of an axiomatic principle. You assume it or you don't, in most cases. Now, because I know God exists, I don't have faith God exists. It was proven to me by God. But the exact, the exact future is a little up in the air a little bit. And, I don't know things for my own benefit in terms of clout chasing as a prophet or something. That much. I had a few dreams once that convinced me I knew the future, but I think those were made so that I would take it seriously when someone told me to do something in the future, which I did, by the way. So I think we're going to have an improving situation in the world, and at least the West and so on, eventually. Soonish. But I can have faith in God having chosen me to act on the world for its good. Now, it's faith, so it's an assumption of sorts, but it's not blind. When I think about it, I don't think God meant for me to like do something that would hurt the world badly or something with divine intervention. So it's not blind. It's reasoned on the character of God. And basically, this playlist has been my attempt to reason out the character of God in some fashion and some mechanisms of the world and so on, so that I could navigate it properly and so on, after getting my worldview shattered. So, you know. But in terms of the day-to-day stuff, and the sort of cultural and national stuff, the Old Testament and the New Testament are very important. And a studied learning of the Bible is important. Now, Doug Wilson is the premier interpreter of in my experience, of the Christians for describing what the Bible is actually talking about. In specific situations, and and Jordan Peterson, Jonathan Piper is a close second. So, I'm not saying you can be spiritual and not religious, and that's okay. I'm saying you have to understand the context. You have to learn specifics. And this whole systematizing thing of mine of the world and God and his character and relations with him and so on is my attempt to piece together a shattered worldview from before with a core update in assumptions after being a secular atheist for a long time. But do keep in mind, someone that thinks in systems might be a little biased towards the system sort of approach in assuming everything is a system. And I'm not sure of myself enough to assume I'm not over systematizing things. It's part of being autistic, I think. It's part of being generally a high IQ. It's part of being a little schizo, left brain oriented. It's part of being INTP. So just because I might be successful with my systematizing, don't assume I have all the knowledge. That's what God has. And He'll teach us eventually. And He gives plenty to learn in the Bible from knowledgeable interpreters of the ancient languages it was first written in, and the context and social context and culture of back then as well. For the words themselves and the society element that was in there, and what turns of phrases mean and so on. Like if I said the other shoe dropped, you might just go like, okay, whatever, what does that mean? And it just means like the next thing happened or something, I think. Or the thing I was saying happened has now happened, or would happen has now happened. That's the kind of context I'm talking about with these things. And the other shoe dropped is like a turn of phrase, by the way. So it's like that kind of explanation of the phrases of the Bible and what the context was back then. Let them who have ears, let them hear. The ears can be for what, like a way of saying someone's wise if they have ears. So, yeah, listening to these preachers that I listed is a good way to balance and not just sit on your laurels, rest on your laurels, and do nothing after these videos if you were educated, edified, or whatever from them. And by the way, this is that group of pastors: Doug Wilson, John Piper, Gavin Orland, Mike Schmitz, Bishop Barron, Athenite Audio, and it's like Athens, the city in Greece, but it's with an O instead of an E. And it's Athonite Audio. And that's ITE, by the way. So it's like of Athos. Of Mount Athos Audio. Athonite Audio. And I do listen to Jordan Peterson's work a little bit here and there, but I find him to be over-psychologized. And I do pay attention to Jung, but he's not jiving with me because he's a little over-psychologized as well. Well, he sort of jives with me, but not entirely. But basically, regardless, the point is, because I know for a fact my secular atheist worldview kind of worked in the past, and because the sheer terror of being unable to rely on the laws of physics overwhelms me, I just kind of assume that the laws of physics are stable. Maybe that's wrong, but it seems to work so far, and it continues to work somewhat, so, you know. But at the same time, if God was to do one miracle and only one, it would be the resurrection of Christ. So it doesn't matter whether he's resurrected or not, though, because he is the Messiah no matter what. That much is obvious from the history and the eyewitness testimony and so on. And I don't mean church history, I mean like Western history as well. So it would be a good idea to study those people and their explanations of the meanings of the Bible passages and so on in detail, because they're skilled at it, they know a lot, they're passionate, they're honest, they're virtuous people, they're not prone to lying, and it's just one of those things that I found helpful, and I think you will too.